Christians, imagine this situation. This is one of the most powerful things I've ever contemplated and wanted to share it with you. It says, John was a busy, well-known businessman and very successful in his pursuits, but he died when he was just 35. A little before his death, when the doctors had told him he didn't have much time left, some of his neighbors came one evening to see him. This is what he said to them. I see, my friends, the kind concern you have for me by the sadness in your faces. I know the thoughts that you have now about me. You think how tragic it is to see a person so young and just starting to taste success in my goals to be given over to death. And perhaps if I had visited you in my condition, I would have the same thoughts about you. But now, my friends, my thoughts are no longer like your thoughts, since my condition is no longer like yours. Now I'm not bothered about the idea of dying young before I've been able to achieve my dreams of success. These things have now sunk into mere nothings. I can't think of a name little enough to call them by. In a few days or hours, I will leave this body to be buried in the earth, and will find myself either forever happy in the favor of God, or eternally separated from all light and peace. Can any word properly express the littleness of everything else I could think about? Don't we live life like a dream, amusing ourselves while we neglect and ignore these unmovable realities? Is there anything more foolish than how we're living as people? We're too wise and too busy to take time for reflecting on these things. Even when we do think about the misery of death, we only think of it as a sad separation from the things we enjoy in life. We rarely mourn over an old man that dies rich, but we often grieve for the young, who we see as taken away from their potential. You yourselves look on me with pity, but not because I'm going unprepared to meet the judge of the living and the dead. You pity me because I'm leaving behind a prosperous business in what should be the height of my life. This is the so-called wisdom of how mankind thinks. Do silly little children even act so irrational? What is so horrible about death? It's the consequences of it. When a man is dead, all that matters to him is the situation he is then in forever. Our poor friend Peter died, as he was getting dressed for a party. Do you think he cares now that he missed that party? Festivals, business, and pleasures and enjoyments seem like a big deal to us, as long as we're not thinking about anything else. But as soon as we add the reality of death to them, they all sink into an equal littleness. The soul that is separated from the body doesn't feel sad for the loss of business or having missed out on a party. If I am now going into the joys of God, could there be any reason to grieve that this happened to me before I turned 40? Would it be a sad thing to go to heaven before I had landed a few more deals or achieved a new level in my business? And if I end up among the lost spirits, would I be comforted at all that at least it didn't happen till I was old and wealthy? If good angels were ready to receive my soul, would it matter to me that I was dying on a poor man's bed in an alley? And if God has delivered me up to evil spirits, to be dragged by them to places of torment, am I going to feel better if they came to take me from a fine bed at my beach house? When you're as close to death as I am, the different states of life are irrelevant to you. It doesn't matter if you're young or old, if you're wealthy or poor, famous or unknown. All these mean nothing to you. Now that judgment is the next thing I'm facing, and everlasting happiness or misery is so near to me, all the enjoyments and pleasures of life seem pointless and insignificant. They cannot make me any happier than the clothes that I wore before I learned to speak as a child. But my friends, how can I act surprised that I haven't been thinking these thoughts before? Everything I'm saying about the terrors of death and the pleasures of life and the importance of holy living are all things I could have taken the time to think about earlier in my life. It's so strange to think that everyday life or work can keep us so forgetful of these great things things that are coming so fast to each one of us. Just as you came in my room, I was thinking to myself, how many people in the world are in my exact position right now? They too are surprised with a summons to the other world. Some are taken from their shops and farms, others from their sports and hobbies. Some are in the middle of court cases. Some are gambling, some are traveling, others are sitting by their fireplaces. All of them are taken at an hour when they thought nothing about it. They are frightened at the approach of death, overwhelmed at the emptiness of all their work, their dreams, their projects. They're astonished at the superficiality of the lives they've lived. They do not know which way to turn their thoughts to find any comfort. Their consciences flying in their faces, bringing all their sins to remembrance. They're tormented with deep convictions of their own foolishness, their hearts feeling guilt in the sight of the angry judge, the worm that never dies, the fire that is never quenched, the gates of hell, the powers of darkness, and the bitter pains of eternal death. Oh, my friends, thank God you're not in our situation, that you have time and strength to give yourselves to trusting God and serving Him in a way that would bring you peace when you're called to God. The only people who will face death with peace will be those who are wholly serving God, besides the foolish or ignorant person who doesn't know what's coming. If right now I had 1,000 worlds, I would give all of them for 1 year more, so that I might present to God 1 year of strong devotion and service, which I hadn't even honestly intended to do before. You might be considering that I've lived free from scandals and partying. I've been a regular part of my church. You might wonder why I'm so full of remorse and self-condemnation at the approach of death. But alas, how pathetic is it that all I can say of myself is that I've lived free from murder, theft, and adultery. You know I've never been thought of as a drunk, but have also witnessed my frequent out-of-control temper, my lust of things and women, and my overindulging in things. And if I'm now going to a judgment, and nothing will be rewarded except for good works, I find myself concerned that I've not at all lived a sober, godly life. It is true, I've lived in fellowship with the church. I generally attended worship and service on Sundays. Occasionally it hindered my business or pleasures, but it's mostly been a habit. If I had more of an intention of actually obeying the Lord, I would have taken it so much more seriously. The thing that now surprises me, above all wonders, is this, that I never really had actually planned on living up to the obedience of the gospel. It never entered into my heart or my head. I never once considered if I was actually working out my salvation with fear and trembling. I didn't ask myself if I thought I was on the narrow path, which Jesus told us few people would find. And I'm thinking, can I really say I've done what's demanded by the gospel of salvation? I've not even been intending in any serious and purposeful way to know God's commands or keep them. Do I really think that my current state is pleasing to God? I've not even been considering what He requires, let alone how to do it. How easy salvation would be if it could fall into every careless person's hands, careless people like me, who've not even been having serious thoughts about it. In the business side of my life, I've used planning and reflection. I've sought the best rules and methods. I've tried to speak with people who have experience and know-how. I've tried to find the reasons why some fail and others succeed in business. I've made no step in my career without great care and caution. I considered every advantage or danger that could be faced. But what's the reason I've brought none of these attitudes to serving God? What is the reason that I, who have talked so much about the necessity of rules, methods, and discipline in worldly business, have all the while never once thought of any rules or methods or managements to carry me on in a life seriously doing God's will? This realization is what astonishes and overwhelms a dying man like me. What pain do you think a man must feel when his conscience shows him he's guilty of so much foolishness? I'm forced to see how consistent, exact, and wise I've been in things of the world, things that are passed away like a dream, and how stupid and senseless I've lived, without any reflection, without any rules, in things that have such eternal, unending consequences. If I only had the problem of a failing body, I could lie here humbly trusting in the mercies of God. But that's not my situation. How can I ignore the fact that I've had no purposeful planning to serve God all these years? I could have called in as many people to help. I could have practiced as many rules and been taught by as many methods of holy living as I cared to find out. If only I had actually intended to and desired it. Oh, my friends, a careless life, unconcerned and unthinking about the service of God, is so without excuse. It is so unworthy of the mercy of God. It is such a shame to be to the capability and reason of our minds that I can hardly think of a greater punishment than for a man to be thrown into the state I'm now in to reflect upon it. John was planning to speak further, but he had his mouth stopped by convulsion. Now he could speak no more. He lay struggling for life about 12 hours and then gave up the ghost. Every reader can imagine this man, John, to have been some particular friend or family member they know. Imagine you saw and heard all that's here described, standing by his bedside when your poor friend lay in such distress and agony, grieving the foolishness of his past life. Doesn't this teach us such wisdom, which may have never entered our hearts before? Let us consider how often we ourselves could find ourselves surprised in the same state of neglecting the life we're called to. We are the friends who still have time. The goodness of God is giving us a chance to reflect and take our following of Christ seriously while we still have time to serve him. I hope this meditation is a benefit to the reader. And this is, so you guys know, there's a book called A Serious Call to a Devout and Holy Life by a guy named William Law. When I read this, because it was so powerful, I went in and tried to kind of retranslate it to modern speak, because some of the language was really old. But this is one of the most powerful things, and every time I read it, it's so focusing for life. So let's take it seriously. Bookmark this so you can listen to it again. Every time I read it, it does something good for me. God bless you.